We never saw a reason to tell you, my mother said, not even looking at me. Across the kitchen table, she sipped her coffee like it was just another Tuesday. Next to her, Richard, the man she married 2 years after Dad died, shifted the bank statements and muttered, "It was just a watch. Just a watch. The Rolex Submariner Dad gave me on his deathbed. The only thing he made sure would only ever be mine." I stood up, I said quietly, pulling the police report from my coat pocket, and walked out. It started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. I was at my desk, half tuned out in a sea of spreadsheets, the hum of office lights melting into the clack of keyboards. The caller ID flashed a local number I didn't recognize. Normally, I'd ignore it. But something, maybe instinct, maybe Dad's voice in my bones, made me pick up. "Is this Amelia Chin?" the voice asked. "Yes." "Who's calling?" "My name's Frank DeMarco. I run DeMarco's Pawn and Gold over on Riverside. I believe I have something that belongs to you. A Rolex Submariner." Everything around me went silent. I pulled open my desk drawer, already knowing what I'd find. Empty. The space where Dad's watch had rested every day for the last 3 years was bare. "The watch," I whispered. "I was afraid of that," Frank said. "Look, I'd rather not talk about this over the phone. Can you come in? I didn't even pack up. I just grabbed my keys and left." My hands were trembling so badly I nearly dropped them twice. Dad's Rolex wasn't just a watch. It was the one thing he left specifically to me. Not through some lawyer or vague verbal wishes. No. He handed it to me himself, his fingers shaking the hospital light too white on his sunken face. "This is yours, Mia. Only yours," he said. He had to loosen the strap. It had gotten too big on his wrist during chemo. He wore that watch through everything. Long shifts in construction, Sunday breakfasts, sitting in the front row of every single one of my school plays. He even wore it the day he collapsed. After he died, I made a promise I would keep it safe. Even when Mom remarried Richard, who had opinions about moving on and not being weirdly sentimental, I kept it close. Even when her new golden boy Tyler moved in loudly proclaiming his latest tech venture, I protected that watch like it was my father's heartbeat. Now it was gone. DeMarco's Pawn and Gold sat between a nail salon and a check cashing place in a strip mall that always felt like bad luck. Inside, it smelled like metal and dust. Frank DeMarco looked exactly like someone who'd spent 30 years appraising desperation. Thick neck, gold ring, eyes that didn't miss much. But when he saw me, he softened. "You look like him," he said. "Your dad." He came in here sometimes, needed tools, short on cash, but always paid back his loans. He disappeared into the back and came out with a leather box I knew in my bones. "This came in yesterday," he said. "Guy said it was his to sell." He opened the lid. There it was, my father's Rolex. It looked smaller than I remembered, like it had aged without him. "Normally I don't question sellers if the paperwork looks decent," Frank said, "but this one made my gut itch." He paused. "Your dad pawned this once 15 years ago, for $3,000. Paid it back in less than a month. Records say it was around the time you started at that fancy private school." My throat closed. I'd gotten into St. Mary's Academy on academic scholarship, but there were still fees, uniforms, books, transportation. Dad had said he'd picked up extra shifts. He never told me he gave up his most prized possession, but that's not why I called, Frank added. He picked up the watch and pressed something on the side. Click. The backplate popped open. Someone modified it. This isn't standard. I found something inside but didn't read it. He handed me a folded piece of paper so small it felt like origami. Dad's handwriting. Tight, careful, familiar. "Mia, if you're reading this, something's happened to the watch. Check safe deposit box 447 at First National. The key is in my toolbox, inside the Stanley level. The watch is yours. But what's in that box? That's your future. Don't let anyone tell you different." I reread it 3 times. Frank's voice returned quieter now. The guy who brought it in said his name was Talish, but signed the pawn slip Tyler Wolf. Tall, early 20s, techie looking. Talked nonstop about an app idea. My mouth went dry. Tyler. Of course. Frank slid the watch across the counter. I never filed the pawn paperwork. It's yours. As far as I'm concerned, it was never here. I can't just... Your dad helped me out once he interrupted. Roofing job my kid was in the hospital. I was broke. He let me pay over 6 months. Never brought it up again. His voice cracked. Call this my repayment. I clutched the watch so tightly my knuckles went white. It was time to go home. But not for comfort. For the truth. The house was too quiet when I walked in. That kind of quiet that hums in your ears like a warning. Mom and Richard were in the kitchen, hunched over a pile of papers, bank statements, if I had to guess. They looked up when they heard the door close. Richard's eyes flicked to the Rolex in my hand. And just for a moment, just 1 second, I saw it. Guilt. Real and raw on both their faces. Then Mom plastered on confusion like makeup. Mia. Why are you home? I walked slowly to the island and placed the watch down between us. The sound of it hitting granite felt louder than it should have. Looking for this, Richard straightened in his chair. Where did you get that better question? I said calmly. Where did you get it? Mom blinked, her lips parting. What are you talking about? The watch was in my desk drawer yesterday. The same drawer Tyler had access to when he came by looking for printer ink. I folded my arms, and today it turns up at DeMarco's Pawn and Gold. They didn't say anything. I continued, voice steady. Frank DeMarco recognized it immediately. He said someone calling himself Talish, who signed the pawn slip, Tyler Wolf, brought it in. Talked about funding his app. Mom's eyebrows pulled together. He didn't mean harm. Tyler just needed a little seed money. This idea, it could really take off. This watch, I said, picking it up again and holding it out, is the only thing Dad left me directly. Not through an estate. Not through a will. He pressed it into my hand the night before he died. You know that. Richard sighed. You're being emotional. I laughed. It came out sharp. You stole from me. That's not emotional. That's criminal. Mom stood abruptly. Don't be dramatic. Don't call me dramatic. My voice rose before I could stop it. I'm the only one here who isn't pretending this didn't happen. She glared. We're a family. Families share. You weren't using the watch. It was just sitting there. It wasn't yours to touch. Richard's tone was oily calm. Tyler's trying to build something. You've always been the safe one, steady job savings, no risk. But sometimes you need to back the dreamers. I stared at him. You mean the boy who blew his trust fund on a Mercedes and a spring break in Cabo, who tanked a food truck and lost thousands in crypto? Mom's mouth tightened. This idea is different. He's got a partner, a pitch deck. I want the money back, I interrupted. Every cent of the $8,500. Richard chuckled. It's gone. Already invested. Then sell something. Because I filed a police report this morning, and if I don't see repayment, I'll press charges. Tyler's name is on the pawn slip. He committed a felony. Mom paled. Mia, please, you can't. He's your stepbrother. I said nothing. You're blowing this out of proportion. She tried again. After all we've done for you, we let you live here. You charge me above market rent. I pay for my own food, my own gas, even half the Wi-Fi. You're our daughter. No, I was Dad's daughter. And the man who loved me would never have let his memory be sold off to fund someone else's ego trip. Their faces blurred together. Shock, fury, discomfort. I turned without another word and walked into the garage. The air back there smelled like sawdust and time. Dad's old toolbox sat beneath the workbench, coated in dust but untouched. I dropped to my knees, fingers flying over latches, flipping it open. There it was. The Stanley level solid wood handle brass ends his name scratched into the side in permanent marker from when I was 8 and always misplacing it. He taught me how to use it in this garage, lining up shelves, marking door frames. He used to say, you don't build anything worth keeping unless it's level. Close enough doesn't cut it. I unscrewed the bubble chamber with shaking fingers. Inside, wrapped in thin plastic and decades of dust, was a tiny brass key. It felt heavy in my hand. First National Bank was downtown. I knew it before I checked the address. Dad used to point it out from the freeway. That's one of the buildings I helped redo the foundation on. The bank manager, an older woman with silver hair and surprisingly warm eyes, led me to a private booth. "I remember your father," she said softly. "Quiet man, reliable, always smiled when he talked about you." Box 447 required both her key and mine. The lock clicked open like a vault of secrets. Inside were 3 things: a thick manila envelope, a leather-bound journal, and a sealed envelope with my name in his handwriting. I opened the letter last. Mia. "If you're reading this, then something happened to the watch. Your mother doesn't know about this box. I started it the day you were born. Inside, you'll find bearer bonds, about $100,000 worth now, maybe more with interest. The journal has notes from my contracting business, outstanding invoices, client info, probably another $50,000 you can collect." I wiped my eyes as I read. "But most importantly, I didn't just leave you a watch. I left you time. Time to walk away when you need to. Time to start fresh. Time to build something without fear. Your mother thinks loud means worthy, that the ones who shout the most deserve the most. But you, my girl, have always been like me. Quiet, careful, stronger than they know. Don't let them steal your time. Love you always, Dad." My shoulders shook, and then absurdly, I laughed. At the very end of the letter, in one last line, he'd added, "P.S. If that boyfriend of yours still hasn't paid you back, ditch him. You deserve better." Even from the grave, he knew. That was the moment I knew what came next. It wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. They stole the watch, but I held the future. I didn't go back to the house that night. Instead, I checked into a small business-class hotel near the freeway, one of those with industrial carpet and windows that overlooked parking lots instead of dreams. But it was quiet, clean, safe, mine. I placed the watch on the nightstand, its tick steady and unfazed, and then I opened Dad's journal. Page after page of penciled notes, itemized bids, blueprints, addresses, phone numbers, every job he ever touched, every dollar accounted for. I felt like I was holding his brain in my hands. And there, on page 92, was the name that made my breath stop. Richardson Construction, $15,000. Completed, not paid, I knew the name. They were still in business, still prominent. I'd passed their shiny office on Maple every day for a year. I remembered the day he worked that job, too. It was right before the first time I saw him cough up blood. They'd stiffed him. Thought the cancer would take care of the debt. They were wrong. I took a photo of the page, then the next, and the next. By morning, I'd read the whole journal twice. And by 8 a.m., I was sitting across from Diane Vasquez, a bulldog of a lawyer recommended by one of my coworkers. Estate recovery was her specialty. Her office smelled like lemon cleaner and quiet confidence. She flipped through the journal, slowly nodding as she read. "Your father kept immaculate records," she said. "That's rare. Most contractors scribble on napkins. This," she tapped a page, "this is a ledger." I slid the envelope of bearer bonds across the desk. These too. He wanted me to have them, but I want what was stolen from him and me. Diane looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "You want to go quiet or loud?" "Quiet," I said, "but firm." She smiled. "I like quiet." The retainer I gave her was more than I'd ever spent on anything except rent, but it felt like an investment in dignity. Over the next few days, she sent out certified letters, filed paperwork, reached out to debtors. One by one, they responded shocked that someone had the receipts. By the end of the week, Richardson Construction offered to pay the full $15,000 just to avoid a lawsuit. They knew what it would cost if the story hit the trades, refusing to pay a dying man who finished their biggest custom deck job on time and under budget. Diane didn't blink. "We'll take it, with late penalties." Meanwhile, I used the bonds to open my own account, a clean slate. I bought a reliable used car to replace the beat-up Civic I'd been coaxing through life, paid off my student loans, and then I started looking at real estate just casually. For the first time, I had options. I didn't tell anyone, not my coworkers, Not old friends. Certainly not Mom. They were too busy spiraling. Tyler had tried texting me long threads about his app, how it was on the verge of exploding, and how I was being dramatic. I didn't answer. Mom emailed me once. Subject line, "Let's talk." No body text, just a blank screen. I ignored that too, because something in me had shifted. I wasn't the quiet, dependable daughter anymore, the one they counted on to forgive, to forget to fade into the background while they took what they wanted. I was my father's daughter. I didn't need noise. I had proof. One Saturday, I drove by the house not to go in, just to see. Tyler's car was parked at an angle in the driveway, driver door open. I watched from down the street. He was yelling into his phone, pacing like a man without a plan. That app. It had already failed. He'd spent thousands on branding office space, a ridiculous neon logo. Never got past beta. The Rolex money gone. That was the difference between me and Tyler. He built castles in air. I built foundations. Back at the hotel, I finally opened the manila envelope of bearer bonds again. $127,000. More than Dad had guessed. Interest had quietly worked in my favor. I imagined him smiling one of those small, lopsided smiles he gave me after teaching me to fix a cabinet hinge or hammer a board straight. Close enough doesn't cut it. I knew what I wanted next, a home. Not just a roof, but a place with solid bones. Somewhere I could hang his level on the wall. A place where no one could take anything from me again. But first, one last thing. I printed out the police report for the stolen watch, highlighted Tyler's name. Then I mailed it to every relative Mom had called to paint me as ungrateful. Aunts, cousins, her church ladies. No caption, no comment, just facts. The calls stopped within days. They thought they took everything. But Dad had planned for them. And now I was executing his plan in my way quietly, steadily, like the watch, like time. And they didn't even know it yet. The first real push came the day after Tyler's app officially crashed. I hadn't spoken to anyone in the house in weeks. I was still living out of the hotel, not because I couldn't afford anything better, but because I was taking my time. Like Dad taught me, measure twice, cut once. Mom called while I was drinking coffee in the lobby. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again and again. By the fourth time, I answered more out of curiosity than anything. "Mia," she said, breathless, like we'd just been interrupted mid-conversation. "Honey, we need to talk, do we?" I said quietly. She paused. "Look, things got out of hand. Emotions were high. But you can't seriously be dragging your family through the courts over a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," I repeated flatly. "He pawned a stolen item. Under California law, that's grand theft. You're being vindictive." I set my coffee down slowly. "No, Mom, I'm being precise." There was silence. Then she switched tones, soft hurt. "You think this is easy for me, watching my daughter destroy her own brother?" I laughed once dry. "He's not my brother. He's your husband's son, who stole from me, and you helped cover it up. He didn't mean to hurt you. He chose to hurt me. And you let him." Another silence. Then, "Where are you even staying? I'm safe. That's what matters. Richard said we could clear out the garage, make it more livable for you again." "Wow," I said, cold. "So generous. You don't have to punish everyone for one mistake," she snapped. "It wasn't one mistake I said. It was a pattern, and it ends now." Before she could respond, I ended the call. Later that evening, Richard emailed me. Subject line, urgent. Stop legal action. He called me unreasonable. Said I was embarrassing the family. Suggested I let bygones be bygones because what's done is done. Then came the line that made me smile. "We're willing to offer a mutual release of claims in exchange for your silence moving forward." Translation, they were scared. I forwarded the email to Diane. Her reply, they blinked. "We don't." By the end of the week, Tyler tried texting me. "Amelia, come on, this is insane. You really gonna ruin my life over a watch? It was sitting in a drawer collecting dust. I'll pay you back when the new idea launches." I didn't respond. 2 days later, You're not better than me just because you're boring and careful. You think being quiet makes you right. Dad's dead. Get over it. That one I forwarded to Diane, too. She called it Exhibit Gold. The final straw came when Mom showed up at my hotel. I don't know how she found it, maybe a credit card statement, maybe she called enough people. But there she was in the parking lot wearing her "I'm just worried" cardigan. "Can we talk?" she asked. "We are talking," I said, arms crossed. "I just want my daughter back," she whispered. "You had her," I replied. "You just didn't want her until she said no." Tears welled up in her eyes. She reached out. "I didn't move. I made mistakes," she said. "But you're taking this too far." I met her gaze evenly. "No, you took it too far. I'm just ending it." She started to say something else, but I stepped back and opened the door to the lobby. This conversation is over. She didn't follow. A week later, Diane called with updates. Richardson Construction paid in full plus penalties. The other two companies are negotiating settlements. You'll likely recover all $43,000 within 60 days. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. And the police report still open. But we'll have more leverage once the civil claims are resolved. You're doing everything right. I looked over at the watch on my nightstand. Still ticking. Still mine. Still proof. Mom tried one last time through Aunt Helena, an email with the subject line. "You know she's not well." I didn't even open it. Just sent Aunt Helena the same thing I'd sent the others, a photo of the police report. Tyler's name highlighted. No reply. They kept trying to twist the narrative. I kept documenting everything. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't bitterness. It was accountability. They stole from me, lied to me, then tried to guilt me into silence. But I was done being silent. I was Dad's daughter. And the quiet ones, when pushed far enough, don't scream. They document. They prepare. They reclaim. I didn't go back for a fight. I went back for my things. It was a bright Saturday morning, the kind Dad used to say was perfect for fixing gutters or washing down the driveway, but I wasn't there for chores. I was there for closure. When I pulled into the driveway, Tyler's car was gone. Richard's pickup was parked crooked like always. I opened the front door with the spare key I hadn't returned. Mom was in the living room folding laundry she probably expected I'd do. Richard sat behind his laptop. The room went still when they saw me. "You can't just walk in," Richard said. "I can," I replied, "because technically I'm still a tenant." He opened his mouth, but I kept walking. I went to my room, packed everything I'd left behind. Clothes, books, my graduation photo with Dad, the cedar box he built for me when I was 12. I moved quietly, deliberately, like the ticking of the Rolex. When I came back downstairs with the suitcases, Mom was waiting. "That's it?" she asked, arms folded. "You're leaving over a watch?" I looked at her. "No, I'm leaving over a pattern, a history of you choosing them over me, of you calling my boundaries selfish and their entitlement love." "You're being cruel," she said, voice rising, "to your own mother." "No," I said calmly. "I'm finally being fair, to myself." She shook her head. "Where will you even go? What will you do?" I almost smiled. "Whatever I want, I have options now, and I earned every one." Richard entered the room, arms crossed. "If you're trying to humiliate us, I'm not," I said. "I'm ending this. Cleanly. Permanently." Tyler stormed in through the front door at that exact moment, his voice already raised. "Amelia, you think this solves anything? You just walked away from your family." "No," I corrected. I walked back to my father. His jaw tightened. "You're nothing but bitter. You live in the past." I tilted my head. "And you live off other people's money." He stepped forward. "You think you're better than us because you got a few bonds and a dead man's journal." "No," I said. "I think I'm better than someone who steals and calls it strategy. You'll regret this." I looked him dead in the eyes. Not for a second. I picked up my keys, then turned to Mom. "I loved you," I said, "even when you loved other people more loudly, but I'm done trying to earn something that should have been given freely." She opened her mouth, but I stopped her. Dad left me more than a watch. He left me proof that I was never invisible, that quiet doesn't mean small, that being steady doesn't mean being weak. I opened the front door. I hope one day you understand the difference between loyalty and silence. And I hope it's not too late. As I stepped outside, Mom's voice chased me. Your father would be ashamed, she said coldly, turning on your family like this. I paused on the porch. The sun was warm against my back. I turned once slowly. My father, I said, clearly left me more than you ever knew. And the only thing he'd be ashamed of is how long it took me to finally walk away. Then I closed the door. Soft. Final. I moved into a small craftsman-style house a week later. 3 bedrooms, white trim, a crooked porch that reminded me of Dad's whistle while working. It was in the same neighborhood he grew up in. I didn't pick it for that reason, but when I found out, it felt right. I kept his toolbox in the garage. The Stanley level sat in its own drawer, the Rolex on my wrist during the day, on my nightstand at night. Richardson Construction paid in full within 6 weeks. Diane recovered a total of $43,000 from 3 unpaid debts. Combined with the $127,000 in bearer bonds, I had enough to live without fear plan, without panic, and build without asking permission. Tyler's app collapsed. Again. The logo he paid $3,000 for was all that ever existed. Richard called once, asking if I could help float a small loan to stabilize some things. I didn't even answer. Mom tried again, too, through family, friends, mutuals on social media. I sent the same photo each time the police report for the stolen watch. Tyler's name highlighted. The noise stopped. Some nights I open the Rolex. Look at the secret compartment. The note is still there. His handwriting a reminder that I wasn't forgotten, that I was chosen, not for what I shouted, but for what I stood for. Time. Dad left me time. Time to leave. Time to grow. Time to say enough. The watch still ticks. Sometimes late at night when the house is still and the wind outside rustles the trees, I can hear it from across the room. It doesn't make a sound most people would notice. But I do. It's the same rhythm Dad used to keep when he worked, measured, unhurried, precise, one nail at a time, one board at a time. That quiet, relentless patience that builds things meant to last. That's what I inherited. Not a Rolex, not a pile of bonds, not even the toolbox or journal. I inherited time. The time he carved out for me while no one else was looking. Time he bought back from banks and contractors. Time he saved in silence so that I could step forward when I was ready. And I did. I stepped away from people who thought silence meant surrender. I stepped around the ones who said I was selfish for saying no. And I stepped toward the life he wanted for me all along, one where I didn't have to ask for permission to exist. The house I live in now isn't perfect. It creaks when it rains and the garden's full of stubborn weeds. But it's mine. Every nail and wall and fixture is a reminder that I built this. I chose this. And I did it without taking from anyone, without guilt-tripping a parent, without stealing a legacy, without rewriting the truth to fit a fantasy. Tyler still posts about new ideas projects in development, investment-ready prototypes. His photos are filtered, his captions long. But I know better, because people like Tyler live off momentum, illusions, the constant need to be seen. And I don't need to be seen anymore. I need to be. I spend weekends restoring old furniture now. It's a hobby, something I never gave myself time for before. The first piece I refinished was an old bench Dad built in high school shop class. I found it in the corner of the garage under a tarp, forgotten and dusty. The wood was warped, screws rusted, but I knew what to do. I stripped it down, sanded it smooth, filled the cracks. I didn't replace the imperfections, I worked with them, because that's what makes it his, what makes it mine. Sometimes I open the Rolex's backplate just to check the note's still there. I never take it out. I don't need to. I just need to see it to remember. Time to be yourself without apology. He wrote that as if he knew the storm would come, as if he knew Mom would bend herself around someone else's son, as if he knew they'd try to make me feel like less for being steady, measured, unshiny. He knew, and he planned accordingly. That's the kind of love that doesn't shout. It builds, quietly. People always talk about generational wealth like it's just money. But what if it's not? What if it's knowing who you are when everyone else tries to convince you you're not enough? What if it's the kind of father who doesn't raise his voice but raises you one steady day at a time so that when the world tries to steal your worth, you know how to hold on to it? What if it's the time to walk away when the line finally gets crossed? What if it's that one heartbeat of a moment where you say this far, no further? I don't wear the watch every day anymore, but I always keep it close. Not because it's valuable, but because it reminds me time is the only currency we truly own, and I'm not spending mine on people who try to steal it. Have you ever had to reclaim something that was rightfully yours but taken like it didn't matter? Have you ever stood up not with a scream, but with a quiet step away that changed everything? If so, tell me your story in the comments. And if you're still finding your moment, just know you're not late. Your time is still yours. Don't let anyone tell you different. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this, stories of quiet strength, buried truth, and the power that comes when you finally say, enough.